Welcome to the Psychology Club podcast, brought to you by Vicente Martinez High School.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Aparicio. I'll be today's host for our Psychology Club podcast. So welcome to the podcast. Today our guests are, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Eyana Rogers.
And
Hi, I'm Jorge Flores.
And we're going to ask them a few questions. They are from Contra Costa Behavioral Health and Cannabis Prevention Coalition. So we're really grateful that you guys are here today. So our first question is, what do you do for Contra Costa Behavioral Health, and can you tell us about the Cannabis Prevention Coalition?
Awesome. So as I said, my name is Jorge. So I function as a Cannabis Prevention Program Manager, overseeing our Prop 64 grant. As you all know, back in 2016, California had the landmark decision for legalizing recreational marijuana. So that became Prop 64. And so part of Prop 64 was having taxes imposed on the regulations, and those taxes are used to support the community, either through public health programs, law enforcement, just different things that the community can support from the taxation. And so that's where we came along, and we're the Cannabis Prevention Program. I can tell you a little bit more about the coalition, but first I'm going to allow my coworker to introduce herself.
Oh, hi. Again, I'm Eyana. I work with Jorge. I am the Senior Health Education Specialist on the Cannabis Prevention Program. And our program is kind of a combination of two different Contra Costa Health programs. So I work in public health on the tobacco prevention team, which is in our community wellness and prevention, but I focus on cannabis, and Jorge works with our alcohol and other drugs.
And I forgot to mention, even though I'm the Cannabis Prevention Program Manager, my classification is Public Health Program Specialist. Mm-hmm. So I come from a public health background. So we're, as Eyana mentioned, she's in public health. So we're merging together public health and behavioral health, alcohol and other drugs, to really show a strong system of support in our cannabis work that we're doing in the community.
No, that's good, yeah.
Now, I can tell you a little bit about what the coalition is. So we actually have two coalitions. We have an adult coalition and we have a youth coalition. I'll talk about the adult coalition, and then I'll allow Eyana to talk about the youth coalition. So the adult coalition is comprised of community members, so concerned citizens, it's treatment providers, it's teachers, it's site administrators, it's other community-based organizations, it's other government officials that want to protect young people from accessing cannabis at a young age. So our goal as an adult coalition is to really put in place policies that prevent young people from accessing cannabis from a young age, and that's through our policy development of working with like local jurisdictions. And I'll go more into detail about what the coalition does more in some of the other questions, but that's a little bit about the adult coalition.
Yeah, and then our youth coalition does very similar things to the adult, but it's comprised of young people like yourself. So it's youth from the ages of 14 to 21 are able to participate, and specifically those who work in our like target cities or jurisdictions. So right now we're working with young people in Pittsburgh or in like the unincorporated areas of Contra Costa to kind of support those goals with policy and protecting young people when it comes to cannabis use. So that could be like educating them on the associated harms so that they can like delay use or not use at all or reduce the use if they're using already.
Nice.
Lots going on.
Yes.
I'm Mackenzie. What are some concerns you have about teens using marijuana?
I'll start.
Mm-hmm.
So some concerns that I'd say I have and that I've seen like in community have, and even the young people that I work with in the youth coalition, concerns are like how it will affect and impact young people in the long term. So how it will affect like their brain development or their physical functions, and then also like that fear of starting young and starting early and how that can like relate and lead to like addiction. Mm-hmm. So really concerns about young people just not knowing that there's harms even associated with cannabis because it is so normalized. So those would be my main concerns.
Yeah, and to add on, some things I think about are mental health issues that young people experiencing in school, like depression, and then utilizing substances, so specifically like cannabis, to deal with those mental health concerns that they have or they're experiencing. So that's a big thing that I've seen, and I've really talked to, like, I used to work in a high school, so a lot of young people would come into the health center I worked at, and they would be very high. And once you talk to them and get a better understanding of why they're using it, a lot of times it's to escape from what their reality. So one thing that I think about when I think about young people using is how do we help them to cope with their realities without turning to substances like cannabis or marijuana.
Wow, I actually never heard of that one, what you just said before. So that's pretty. Sorry, anyway.
Hey, my name is Gavin, and does marijuana use when at a young age impact later mental or physical health?
Yeah, it does. It has impacts on both. So like Jorge was saying a little bit in the last one with like those mental health impacts. So thinking about your brain and stuff, like if you're using a substance that can before your frontal lobe is fully developed, which is a lot of why we're focusing on young people, because your frontal lobe doesn't develop until you're 26, right? So if you're using cannabis before that, you're having impacts on your brain in the long run, and your frontal lobe is really what is in charge of like pleasure and things like this. So like your decision making and all of that. So if you're kind of stunting your growth of your frontal lobe by using substances and things, that can have impacts in the long run. I'd say in terms of like physical, there's impacts there as well. So like smoke is smoke. So if you're thinking of like smoke with tobacco and stuff and how that can impact your lungs, some of those same kind of like chemicals and carcinogens can be expelled when you're smoking cannabis as well. So you can have breathing problems or lung problems, or like thinking about maybe you play a sport or something, maybe you don't have that lung capacity anymore, so that's impacting your kind of skills in that realm as well.
Yeah, and for older adults, there's been a lot of studies recently where cannabis can increase heart rate and high blood pressure. So that's a physical result of smoking cannabis. So that's something that a lot of young people, and as they get older adults don't think about in terms of the effects of cannabis that can have physically on the body.
And not even just don't think about, like don't know that it can be like a repercussion that can come from it.
Wow. So you kind of talked about the mental health, but how does cannabis affect your mental health?
Well, it can affect it in many different ways. One of the biggest things, which one of the questions later is on addiction, but it can lead to what's called cannabis use disorder. And it can also lead to symptoms like it can lead to psychosis. That's one of the questions later, but mental health specifically can lead to like psychosis. It can lead to feelings of paranoia. It can lead to feelings of isolation. So it can have a big impact on your brain and the way that you're thinking and the way that you interact with other people.
Yeah, to add to that, so thinking about why people use in the first place as well, like you said earlier, like as a means of kind of coping and dealing with things that can be mental health issues, so like stress, depression, anxiety, things like that. People will often use cannabis as a way to kind of combat those symptoms and those feelings that are associated with those mental health issues, and it may help them in the short term or may seem like it's helping them, but if with like lots of use of cannabis and kind of like becoming reliant on that as a way to cope when you're on the back end and you're maybe like trying to quit or you're going through some sort of like withdrawal symptom, those symptoms that you were originally trying to kind of suppress, like maybe the anxiety and stuff, those go up when you're trying to quit. So it's like not really helping the way that people think it is.
Mm-hmm. Why do you guys think people smoke, use, or ingest marijuana products, but like specifically like teens?
Well, biggest thing is friends, peer pressure. That's a big thing. Cannabis use at a young age can be seen as, especially with the passage of legalization of cannabis, it can be seen as, oh, it's safe. Also, the way that it's marketed to young people, specifically as medicinal. So it can be seen as medicine. So young people, as we mentioned, can be dealing with anxiety, depression. And so they're thinking, oh, if I smoke cannabis, I'm going to feel better and I'm going to be happier. But in reality, that's not the case. And then what we've seen is the reverse of that. Plus, too, a lot of people that smoke cannabis get very hungry. And when you eat a lot of food, what can happen? Increased weight. so there's a lot of different reasons why that I've researched and talked to young people why they used, and the big common thing is peer pressure. If your peers are doing it and they see it as normal, it's normal. In a lot of schools, we're seeing a lot of bathrooms be used where people are going and vaping. And especially now, the different ways to use cannabis, there's so many different ways now. It's not just smoking a flower anymore. Now you have these vapes, you have tinctures, which are like little oil things, droplets that are super potent. Plus, too, the potency is so much different now. So you're dealing with a lot of different things, and these young people, especially at a young age, young people experiment. And so when they experiment, they're experimenting with different drugs, and so specifically cannabis. So they're trying these different ways to ingest it, and so those are some of the thoughts that come to my mind.
Does marijuana? Oh wait, no. Sorry. Is cannabis addictive in your eyes?
Yes, cannabis is addictive, and it can lead to, as I mentioned, to cannabis use disorder. So, in plain short, it's addictive, and a lot of people may not think it's addictive, but a lot of people that have used cannabis and try to stop go through what's called, as Eyana mentioned earlier, withdrawal symptoms. So as they're going through withdrawal symptoms, they may not know that they're going through withdrawal when they're trying to stop. So that's the biggest thing for people to know is that it is addictive. It is a controlled substance, and it can lead to many different things that affect a young person.
What are the withdrawal effects? Like, what could happen when they're withdrawing?
So when someone's withdrawing, it can be very different. They can go through symptoms of like sweatiness. So like sweatiness, it can be hard to go to sleep at night, especially if someone is using cannabis to go to sleep and then they stop using it, then they can get, not paranoia. What is the word? Insomnia. Yes, insomnia. So they can get insomnia because they think they need it and they're going through these symptoms of cravings, thinking that in their mind, if they don't get it now, that they're not going to feel better. So those are some different withdrawal symptoms that I know of.
Yeah, I'd say a couple more too. Big ones are like increased anxiety, and also like mood changes is another one that's associated with it. And then I'd say another thing that comes to mind too when thinking about cannabis being addictive, and a symptom that people don't often talk about is cannabis hypermesis syndrome, which is essentially like this vomiting disorder where like someone who uses a large quantity of cannabis consistently like you're just like vomiting nonstop. Look it up, it's wild.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on that, but I believe you.
Yeah, I believe.
So what is the link between cannabis and psychosis?
Hello? So the link between cannabis and psychosis, there is a thing called cannabis-induced psychosis. Another thing that comes with, like when you're using frequently and you're using high dosage cannabis, it can induce like these effects of psychosis or like hallucinations, and what's the word I'm looking for? Starts with a D. Hallucinations. Delusions.
Good job.
Yes. Hallucinations and delusions and things like that, which can lead to like a psychotic episode. There's you don't have to have like a predisposition for like a genetic trait or anything for psychosis and those sort of things. It can happen your first time or it can happen your 20th time. Like you don't really know when to expect it, and then when someone's in that state, they don't know what is real or fake, and it can lead to some kind of scary or dangerous situations. So there is a link between cannabis and psychosis.
And there's also been studies of increased diagnosis of bipolar disorder from cannabis use. Yeah, tied to what we've just been speaking about, psychosis. So there's been different studies about this, and so it's interesting because a lot of people, especially young people, are not aware of this, and so it requires a lot of education and understanding the effects that cannabis use can have, and especially increased cannabis use.
What is the difference about marijuana today than like 30 years ago?
Oh, there's a lot of differences. A lot. So back then, marijuana only had about 3 to 5% of THC in it, and THC is the compound that gives that euphoric high feeling. So it was only about 3 to 5%. Plus, back in the day, it was only came in flower. Now, THC in a flower is about 15 to 30%, so it's a lot higher. Plus, you have you all ever heard of shatter or wax? And so shatter and wax have up to 90% of THC into it. So that's such a higher concentrated level of THC that you're getting into your body. And so it's a lot more different. There's also the cannabis now is a lot more, especially from dispensaries, regulated. So it's a lot more safer, especially if someone's buying from a dispensary, because there's cultivation laws that are in place to make sure that the growing is not, for example, including a lot of pesticides into their grow. Back then, that wasn't the case. It was a lot more from the illegal cannabis market. So there's a lot of big difference between the cannabis then and now. It's just now it's a lot more potent. It's a lot more stronger. So just imagine a young person who's, let's say, 15 years old, 14, and they decided to start smoking, and they specifically went to use wax. And that concentrate could be 90%. That's a lot for that young person to handle.
Especially for a first time.
And for a first time. That's what you may hear someone talking about, I was tripping out.
Yeah. That's like...
It's a common thing. They're tripping out, but that's what really happening is you're experiencing a mental health crisis in that moment.
Yeah. And I would say, like, talking about the difference of the THC levels being like 3 to 5% up to like 90% now. And if your argument is based on like, well, it's natural, it's a plant. When it was natural in a plant, they were at 3 to 5%. There's nothing natural about changing and altering a plant so that it's like almost 100 times stronger.
And now they're adding like flavors into it, and it's just like...
And that's a whole nother thing.
and that because also too there's natural flavors in the cannabis plant, which are called terpenes. So we'll talk more later with some of the questions about policies that protect against flavored, but you have terpenes, natural flavors that come in cannabis plants. So that's why you're still hearing, for example, like names like Granddaddy Purple that are very unique, because what is a purple flavor?
Right.
There's
Blue Dream.
Exactly. So it's a lot different now, and that's why we foresee in the next few years, especially with the increase of high potency, more cannabis use disorder occurring in people, especially young people. So there's trends that we're following and seeing and seeing how it's impacting users who use at a younger age.
What is the difference?
What are some current... Gavin?
What are some current policies in Contra Costa County that impact the sale of marijuana products?
Awesome. So in Contra Costa County specifically, so when we're thinking Contra Costa County, we're thinking unincorporated. So Iana mentioned earlier about unincorporated. So unincorporated are the cities that don't have a local city council. They're governed over by the Board of Supervisors. And so in unincorporated Contra Costa County, we have cannabis retail licensing that requires dispensaries to follow specific guidelines. So specific guidelines that are public health strategies. So for example, limiting the amount of cannabis dispensaries that are allowed within the county. So for example, if you notice in certain communities, there's a bunch of tobacco retailers. So if you're a young person and you're seeing all these tobacco retailers, that you become what? You see it so much.
Become like influenced.
You can become influenced by it. Yeah.
I couldn't think of the word.
Yeah, you become influenced by it. So one of the things that in unincorporated Contra Costa County is we make sure that there's a cap. So there's currently a cap, I believe, of 4 retailers, 4 to 6 retailers. I don't have the exact number yet, but there is a cap. There's also policies related to billboards. So in unincorporated Contra Costa, you're not going to see billboards that say, for example, 420 sell, buy an ounce for $20. You're not going to see that in unincorporated Contra Costa. There's also a ban on flavored cannabis. So as I mentioned earlier, cannabis plant can have terpenes, which provide flavor, but there's laws in place that don't allow for artificial flavors to be added into the plants. So that's one of the things Contra Costa does is they say, no, you can't add flavored into the cannabis plant. Before, in 2019, 2020, there was also a law where they banned all vaping devices to be sold, but that ban was repealed in 2022. So dispensaries in unincorporated Contra Costa can sell vape pens. They just can't be flavored vape pens.
And then all of those that Jorge just listed are specifically for like our unincorporated areas. So like we're in Martinez right now. There are some differences in Martinez as well. So I looked it up and I know Martinez has like what they call a buffer zone. So like they have and allow a certain number of retailers or dispensary type things in the city limits, but they have to be with like outside of 900 feet from like a school or business or something. And then there's like you can't have signage, for example, outside of a retailer or something, and that's something that's like specific to Martinez. Other communities do it as well, but it differs in terms of policy where you're at.
How many of you have ever driven down Highway 4 in Antioch? Have you seen any billboards of cannabis out there?
Not that I can remember.
Look a little more closely. In Antioch, you'll see billboards like for sale, like cannabis sales and things like that. And that's because in Antioch, there's not a lot of regulations around billboards and advertisements. So when that happens,
even a cap on like how many retailers you can have. Whereas like in Martinez, you can only have, I think it's like 2 storefronts. But if you're like thinking, you're like, there's more. It's like, oh, well, this one is unincorporated. So it's like the invisible lines of cities.
Exactly. And in Antioch, they have up to 10 dispensaries.
Yeah, they do have a lot out there.
There's a lot out there. And then recently we were working with the city of San Pablo, and they're a city of 2.5 miles. So they're a very small city, but they have allowed 3 storefront dispensaries. But with their dispensaries, they're making sure that they have the public health best practices. So specifically advertising, billboards, caps on how many storefronts they have. So there's different jurisdictions are going to do things differently depending on what their local city council decides on what they want to do. So there's policies in place, there's programs in place, there's can we do more? Yeah, we can do more. Specifically, we talked about potency. There's a higher rate of the higher rate of potency. There's no cap on how potent cannabis can be. So people are just buying and experiencing these side effects from the high potency that they're ingesting.
So, what are some programs and strategies to reduce youth access?
I would say that, like we mentioned earlier, like the Youth Coalition, that's something that's working actively with young people to try and educate at least the small group to begin on these like associated kind of harms and risks that we've been talking to you about today, so that then they're able to kind of have that knowledge and be a source of information for their fellow peers, and hopefully be able to have some sort of impact in their groups of friends and family. But the key right now, I think, is really that education piece. So how do we even go beyond this youth coalition of very, like a small group? I think we have 12 young people who are like, have shown an interest in this topic, but we had so many more people apply too. So there is a thirst for this information and knowledge and like questions to be answered from young people. So how do we get the information out to you all? So I think figuring out some sort of education strategy is a bit.
And education is a big piece. I can specifically talk about a program that we have with our County Office of Education. It's called CAP, which stands for Cannabis Awareness and Prevention Project. It's a project that the goal is to get to every school and provide as much education, alternatives to suspension, Y-Vape. Have you all ever heard of Y-Vape before? It's an online system that helps young people that are using to stop using. So there's also family engagement. So there's a lot of different within that program specifically. The goal is to hit as many schools or target or. I hate that word. To influence as many schools out there within the community to be able to talk to young people and educate them as much as possible about cannabis use, and be able to train teachers, counselors, principals, how to talk to young people about cannabis use, cannabis prevention, and education.
How does where somebody lives impact how likely it is for teens to start using, for example, a city versus rural areas, or Contra Costa County versus like Humboldt County versus Los Angeles County?
Yeah. So I'd say a large part can be accounted to like access and the normalization of it. So if you're in an area or a space where you see a lot of those advertisements and billboards we're talking about, or you know that there's a lot of kind of retail spaces in your area, or it's something that's very normalized, like your peers, or every time you go to the bathroom someone's smoking, like it's always around you, those are the things that will maybe make you more interested or intrigued in like trying it or things like that. So I think it really has to do with what is around you. Like we said earlier, like young people, you're gonna experiment. You're gonna like have your peers around you who are able to kind of have an influence on you. But if it's something that's around you and your group of people and your group of friends and family and stuff, you're more likely to use. So a lot to do with where it is. Let me look at my notes. I feel like I had something else for you.
This is so
So yeah.
And also, I like to think about, I've noticed in more city areas compared to rural areas, you have like, for example, cannabis cafes. Yeah, so last year they passed a law called AB 1775, which focused on allowing cannabis cafes to be able to consume food and cannabis on site at dispensaries. So you have a lot of, for example, in Los Angeles, they've already implemented these cannabis cafes within their dispensaries, and their goal was to increase foot traffic and get more people to use, or emphasis to use on site. So when you have a lot of that and you're seeing a lot of that as a young person, you're going to think, what? Oh, this is cool. I can go out and ingest cannabis on site and eat food and do all things that I want to do. And it can become more normalized for a young person, and that can lead to them using and them thinking that this is not harmful to them.
Are there age restrictions for these like cafes?
Yes, so 21 and over. Yeah, so like cannabis in California, you have to be 21 and over to go into a dispensary. There are dispensaries that are medicinal only, medical, and so you can be 18 for that, but you have to have a prescription. Yeah, prescription from a provider.
Okay.
What are some resources that can help young people who want to stop or reduce their marijuana use?
That's a really good question. There's There's a lot of different services out there that can help. The main one that I can think of is through Contra Costa County's behavioral health. We have what's called an access line that can connect a young person to treatment services. So the department the program that I am is called the Alcohol and Other Drug Services. We have substance use counselors that actually would meet with a young person and be able to help them reduce or eliminate their use through counseling and education and support and guidance. So that's an option. There's also other community-based organizations within Contra Costa County that can support them. There's what's called the REACH project. They provide substance use counseling. They go into the schools. There's also different, like the Rise Center in Richmond. There's different centers within the community that can help a young person be able to stop. And there's other programs out there. There's a lot of schools that are now partnering with our county, AODS, to have substance use counselors in the schools, meeting with young people and helping them to stop.
And I'd say another one that comes to mind for me too, and it's not specific to like stopping or reducing, but like if you're interested in like learning more or even looking for resources, one of our partners, Decoded, their website's decodedca.org. They are a great space for like information. Like maybe you're not ready to talk to someone or have a conversation about it, but you're just intrigued in learning more. Like it's a website you can go to and you can maybe get some of those answers to the questions that are related to cannabis. And then they also have a great resource for like local resources. So they have some like a button called Get Help where you can put in your zip code and you'll be directed to resources that are in your area as well.
That's good.
Well, thank you guys for being on our podcast today. Check out the links in our show notes for great resources. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe for more mental health content.
Yes, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.